2 dead parents is what Batman had, Kyle. But you, as not Batman, but a man of bats, your parents are allowed to live. DarbyCast, Wildcard Friday. Kyle and I, we were just talking about being a bat keeper. And I don't even know if that's what it's called. It could be something way more powerful sounding. Kyle, this is your cue to look that up. But in the interim, allow us to explore what it might feel like to have the title of Bat Lord, Bat King, Bat Liaison, Bat Master in Chief. How good would that feel? Okay. 2024 is going to be a year of unexpected twists and turns. We know this. We know on the national scale, things could be pretty goofy when all the normies finally wake up to some pretty harsh realizations that we've all known for quite some time. The old Vaxaruski, pretty sketchy. Ukraine war, money laundering. Joe Biden, pretty much brain dead. Feminism, a weird coping mechanism for disgusting chicks and dudes without spines. We've known this, right? Border crisis, extreme levels. And these could come to a head. A lot of these things could really boil over. Complete economic collapse. The collapse of the dollar, Kyle. All these things are on the horizon. But we've known about these things for a long time, and it most likely does us very little good to keep consuming negative information about these things online. You got to get out there and be action-based and do meaningful activities. Rather than this being a 2024 New Year's resolution episode, this is going to be a hobby episode where we discuss valuable things that we can do with our time, Kyle, rather than going online and hearing more of the same. First item on that agenda, being a bat keeper. You could build bat barns all over your neighborhood. Bats are a protected species, as far as I understand. Kyle, please verify that. Trust but verify everything that I'm saying, Kyle. But you build some bat barns. Now, why is this important? Bat keeping or having relationships with bats. It's a two-way street, right? You've got them, but they've got you as well. But why is this important? Because of mosquitoes, Kyle. That's right. Last year, maybe the year before, Bill Gates announced that he was going to try to vaccinate people by using genetically modified mosquitoes. Enter bats. That plan is totally foiled. Your neighborhood, Kyle, could be bat forward and mosquito free. I don't know if we've had many malaria outbreaks in the States, but those numbers are not rising if you're building all these bat barns. Batbarn.com, Kyle. Please buy that if you would. Make it a resource center for bat hobbyists who are thinking about maybe going pro. We'll have bat barn schematics on that portal, Kyle, as well as how-to videos when it comes to building strong relationships with bats and your neighbors who might have some questions about the bats. Picture this, Kyle. You're spending less and less time online and more time with bats. Your neighbors have noticed that you've built about 15 bat barns around the neighborhood. And some of them are giving you pushback, while others are saying, how do I get in on this? And that's when you direct them to batbarn.com and tell them to select the Get Involved tab. Maybe call the toll-free hotline. Kyle, you will be the one-man call center for that. Can I count on you to do a good job with that? Hope so, right? There could be people in your HOA that frown upon this and say, I don't want bats in my neighborhood. That's when you hit them with tough luck. That's what you say to them. Bats are a protected species. As far as I know, Kyle, please look that up. Trust but verify everything that I'm saying, always. Let's keep this on the level. But those people are screwed because once the bats are in place, you cannot remove them. And I'll be damned if somebody tries to screw with my bats. That's fighting grounds. Can you imagine somebody trying to poach an elephant in your neighborhood, Kyle? As far as the law goes, this is pretty much the same. In the past, we've talked about amazing offline hobbies like falconry. That lane's still open. That would be really cool because your falcon could eat one of the bats from time to time, put some selection pressure on the bats, so then the bats get stronger. Do you see how this all works, Kyle? You could be into falconry and battery, not the crime, tending to bats. Leatherworking, Kyle. You could tan hides to make saddlebags for people with horses. Not only are these hobbies, Kyle, but these are businesses. And then you can start trading in hides if the currency collapses. Somebody says, I'd like to sell you a chicken. You say, well, I don't have any greenbacks. Can I get you a saddlebag? Or a handful of baby bats? Now that's a new economy, Kyle, that's going to stand the test of time. You could learn gunsmithing. That's another great offline activity. Although I think you end up on a watch list pretty quickly for doing that. Who cares at this point, right? Chess club. That's another good offline activity. You do that with other people. All these should be considered team sports. It's more important than ever for all of us to pursue offline interests with other people. Falconry, leatherworking, bat colony cultivation, fishing. Grab a drop line, Kyle. Give it a shot, right? Or you fish with your falcon. A lot of these ideas can be hybrids, Kyle. And that's why people come to the DarbyCast, is to find the connections between things that are seemingly unrelated. Canoeing, if you live by a lake, good for upper body strength and your core, which is a really important set of muscles. Woodworking, carpentry, take after our Lord and Savior, JC, Kyle. Use that to build bat barns. Sculpting, painting, drawing. Make some art that glorifies beauty in a world that wants to celebrate mediocrity and extinguish beauty at every turn. Push back on that and say, I'm going to make a sculpture of a guy with a falcon on one shoulder and a bat on his other, and a chick who's just all about it. Total power couple. She's a beekeeper. He's in charge of the falconry and the bats. They're madly in love. Their kids are so into identifying various herbs and doing foraging. Are you seeing this positive vision for the future? We don't want to get into home brewing beer, Kyle, and here's why. Because if you get into home brewing beer, you become a pretentious prick and nobody likes you. And you start telling people like, oh, this beer is like pretty hoppy. It's pretty hops forward. Nobody fucking cares, right? So let's skip that. work on winemaking or astronomy. I don't want to hear about your Mercury being in retrograde. I want to hear that you are looking through a telescope and figuring out star charts and looking for esoteric patterns as celestial bodies pass by. Imagine a community of people doing all these things. Baking bread, Kyle, feeding your neighbors, BMX biking, inspiring your neighbors. Can you imagine how good that would feel, Kyle, if you built a BMX off-road course next to your bat barns as your Falcon provided aerial support, and you just did tricks that people were like, is that legal? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that's 2024 for you. Hot air ballooning. Where has that been, Kyle? That's a great activity. And you could probably make one yourself. A hot air balloon? All you need is a flamethrower and a couple leftover sheets. Stitch them together. And then you weave together a big wicker basket and you've got a hot air balloon. You can go wherever you want. And nobody's going to take you out of the sky. You remember that Chinese weather balloon, quote unquote, from last year? What was that? Here's a great offline activity. Sleight of hand. Magic. The discipline of illusion woven with wonder. You know, some people say magic is gay, but that's when you turn around and you say, well, no, you're gay. And you pass them a card, an ace of clubs or something, and then in their own handwriting, in Sharpie, it's just written on the card, like, he's right, you know. You could have a book club, Kyle, where you only study books that are really sketchy. How about that? Kyle, you spend upwards of 11 hours a day interfacing with screens, do you not? Imagine if you just took 1 or 2 of those hours and applied them towards any of these things. It'd be incredible. Just pick 2. They can be related or unrelated, but you make them related. Book club and canoeing. Maybe you have your book club out on a lake. Everybody brings their book in a canoe and then takes a nap while looking at the stars. Evening book club with a lamp that runs on whale blubber. Whaling, Kyle. That's another offline activity. What about becoming a lapidary? You cut gemstones. Kyle, let's be honest. We're all still hung up on bats, right? I'm talking about all these other activities, but it's really pulling us away from the most inspiring of all the ideas that we're exploring right now. Guano is bat poo, good for enhancing soil, which you can grow stuff in. Gardening, Kyle, is what I'm alluding to. Kyle, this is where community comes into play, right? You and maybe a couple other key players are in charge of the neighborhood bat scene. Whereas your friends, colleagues, maybe, peers, are doing guerrilla gardening, very much in the lane of a Johnny Appleseed. But you need fertile soil. Fertile, Kyle? Which one is it, right? Either way, you've got a lot of work to do, but you just carry a bag of seeds with you. Maybe that's your lane for offline activities this year. You have a burlap satchel or one made out of leather, remember, tanning hides, making saddlebags. You could also easily pivot into making seed satchels. And then you go around planting trees, fruit-bearing trees, maybe some root vegetables, Kyle, carrots, but also yams. Maybe you get a truffle pig. You find some truffles and you sell them to local restaurants. That's a great offline activity. What about buying some saltwater crocodiles or alligators or something on the black market, Kyle? And then you station them at the southern border. Do the job that our government won't. That's what we're looking for here, is high impact offline activities. You remember how I was talking about that statue with that woman who was a beekeeper? Beekeeping's important. Cross-pollination, Kyle. Pretty important stuff. But imagine that. You've got a total ecosystem in play. Bats eating the insects, your falcon eating a bat or two, kind of the slow bats that nobody's really impressed by. Bat guano is everywhere. You buy seeds somewhere. Hardware store, Kyle. Mom and pop shop, don't put money in the pocket of big hardware. But then you're growing stuff. These fruit trees, the bats eat the fruit as well. They're eating mosquitoes. They're eating fruit. Everybody in your community is having a good time. To take a little downtime, you have your canoe book club in the evening, lit by lamps that run on whale blubber. The trees that you plant are in great shape because of the bees that your chick is tending to. Everything is firing. 100%. Some people might be listening to this episode right now and are pretty keen on falconry, beekeeping, maybe even the gators at the border. But they're not all in on bats. And to that I say, get out. Get lost. Turn off the podcast. If you can't get behind a cool idea like this, you're a little too limited in your imagination to call yourself one of us. And that's fine. Check that. No, it's not. Get out. As we all know, I'm an idea guy. And a lot of these ideas that I'm throwing out on the table right now are in their infancy. It's up to you and guys named Neil. Let's not forget episode number 27 entitled Kneeling, where we all sorted through what it looks like to be a great idea person versus a decent execution person. When it comes to execution, guys named Neil, not bad. I'm an explode off the blocks kind of guy. Neil's the second leg of the relay. You, the listener, the DarbyCast doctor, you might be that third leg of the relay or the anchor. If we're talking about a 4x100, it's a quick race, but not an unimportant one. Serious race, Kyle. Somebody could be listening to this who just needed a smidgen of inspiration. They're going to hear creating bat barns and they're going to say, why stop there? Let's make other kinds of barns as well. Seems pretty smart to me. Somebody's probably listening to this episode right now and heard bats eating mosquitoes and is probably thinking to themselves, well, why don't we give them steroids so they can take out pigeons? I don't see a problem with that. Do you? Imagine spreading your seeds from a hot air balloon. I'm combining all these ideas in every possible way. And that's what we need to do as a community, is find problems and solve them through unconventional means. If the dollar's going to collapse, we're going to need to tan hides. If Bill Gates and other dirtbags are going to try to use genetically modified mosquitoes to give you HIV, the virus responsible for AIDS, we need to have countermeasures in place. If the borders will not be shored up, we need gators and crocodiles in the Rio Grande. Rio Grande. Tomato, tomato, Kyle. We all know what I'm talking about. Just get them there. And then what underpins all of this? In-person community and getting off the net. You, like I, may have noticed a couple times in the past couple years whoa, I'm spending a little too much time online. And I'm barely participating in my own life. That's like the extreme end of things. Kyle, that's what you said to me the other day. And it gave me pause. Made me upset, but then it inspired me to talk about bats. So to that, I say good job for you admitting that you had a problem. Because without your honesty, we don't get into batbarn.com. We do not get into saddlebags, falconry, beekeeping. We don't get into canoeing, chess club, cutting gemstones. We don't get into constitutionally aligned alligators. I've said it before, and I will say it again, Kyle. The one thing that right-wing podcasts and right-wing podcasters are not allowed to talk about, because they get ripped off the air, and we need to be able to risk losing everything, Kyle, because this is the important message that nobody's allowed to say. We need in-person community. Online communities fall utterly short of what needs to get done. Maybe you're not going to start building bat barns. Maybe you're not going to spend $5,000 on a falcon and the glove. I don't know how much the glove costs. Could be pretty pricey. But there are low cost barrier to entry in-person communities just waiting to be joined by you. Philosophy club, church, wandering around aimlessly at a farmer's market and not buying anything, but teasing the shopkeepers and saying, whoa, that looks pretty tasty. Do you have a sample? Could I have another sample? And although that's not the highest ethics play, maybe you get involved with one of these apricot farmers. And you say, I'd like to get involved. Bring some bats. If you're not all in on any of these ideas, so be it. Make them better then. Don't be a naysayer. Take them and make them better. Maybe you don't do the alligator thing at the southern border. Maybe it's piranhas you throw in the river. Whatever it is that you see fit, you have my endorsement. You have Kyle's blessing. Maybe this is the year you start burying treasure in the woods. Maybe this is the year you start learning lethal striking techniques. Maybe this is the year that you get a mentor or start mentoring somebody else or both. Maybe this is the year that you learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, but definitely not a crossbow. We all know about the crossbow community. No thanks, Kyle. Okay. Maybe this is the year that you learn how to play the steel drums. Start a steel drum club. Everybody's getting together and playing the Girls Gone Wild theme, and you've got a turnkey community right there. You know who will appreciate that? Probably bats. Bats are very keen on sounds in a general sense. Then all of a sudden, you learn ways to shepherd bats. Sheepdogs herd sheep, but steel drums could herd bats. Is that possible? I don't know. You tell me. Like I said, I'm just throwing some ideas out there to get all the juices flowing for this year. And share your goals with friends. Say, I want to learn how to play the steel drum so I can command bats in an auditory way that's both pleasing to the bats and to the people around me. Where the fuck has that been, right? Maybe this is the year that you start making cloaks for people. Depending on where you live, maybe they're a lighter fabric or they could be heavier. Any kind of cloak that the situation calls for. Maybe this is the year that you strengthen some existing relationships, kick the tires on some old relationships that you've let go, start some new relationships. If you're married, maybe this is the year you have gratuitous amounts of unprotected sex and have children. Great offline activity, having kids. Because eventually you're going to want to pass the torch of your bat activities down to the next generation. You're going to want your wife to teach your kids and their friends about beekeeping. Maybe this year you start a street gang. Probably not, but who knows? Some people, naysayers, are currently thinking some of these are not good ideas. Compared to the stuff that's being promoted in mainstream culture, all of these ideas are complete grand slams. Like I've said in recent episodes, it's one thing to identify problems, but it's another thing to provide solutions. We know the problems, we know what exists. But until society fully breaks down into a Mad Max style scenario where the strongest of us have harems of women covered in motor fuel and strong attitudes, then we got to run some plays. This is as much of a reminder for me as it is for anybody else, Kyle. We need more activities. We know that society might not have that huge calamitous collapse. It might just keep getting crappier and crappier over time. And although society in a lot of ways is not worth participating in, certainly not paying taxes, my goodness, there are still many a thing worth pursuing. Relationships, hobbies, businesses, ideas, connections, leadership. Do you want to be Batman, Kyle? Or do you want to be a man of bats because you can't be Batman, so there's only one lane open? Yes or no, Kyle? Yes or no? But it's going to be a phenomenal year for us. I can feel it. I hope people run with these ideas. If you happen to start a highly successful gator farm or hot air balloon business, just recommend this podcast to people and say, I got a little inspiration from a guy named Kyle. Let's give all the credit on this to Kyle. How about that, huh, pal? That's another important thing, is using the time that we're spending interfacing with digital devices and on the net, using that time wisely. You could spend your time in a lot of worse ways than listening to every episode of the DarbyCast multiple times over. I'll tell you that much. If you're feeling uninspired or unaligned, I've got you covered. Kyle's got you covered. We've got ideas aplenty to put wind in your sails, bats in your neighborhood, and bees in your bonnet. Books in your canoe. Saddlebags in your general store. Falcons in your atmosphere. JC in your heart. Ideas in your noggin. Courage in your biceps. Seeds in your burlap sack. Authenticity in your attitude. 2024 is going to be a wacky year, but let's make sure that we orient ourselves towards the in-person stuff. Offline. Real communities. Online communities, okay. In-person community, great. That's the big takeaway. But that's DarbyCast for you, Wildcard Friday.